The library had always been my sanctuary. Between the towering shelves of books, I could disappear into worlds far more interesting than my own quiet existence. That's where I first noticed him, Rowan, the most popular guy in our university's architecture program. He moved through life with an ease I envied, drawing people to him like moths to flame with his infectious laugh and effortless charm. I never imagined he'd notice someone like me, Evren Cooper, the perpetually anxious art history major who preferred the company of centuries-old paintings to actual people. But on that autumn afternoon, as golden light filtered through the library's high windows, he approached my usual corner table with determined steps. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, already pulling out a chair. "I've seen you here before. You're always so focused. What are you reading?" I fumbled with my copy of The Picture of Dorian Gray, nearly dropping it. "Oh, just some research for my thesis on aesthetic movement portraits." His eyes lit up with genuine interest, catching me off guard. "That's fascinating. Tell me more?" That conversation lasted 3 hours, until the librarian kindly kicked us out at closing time. As we walked across the darkening campus, Rowan asked if I'd like to get coffee sometime. I said yes, convinced I was dreaming. Our first date turned into weekly coffee meetings, which evolved into dinner dates and long walks through the city's art galleries. Rowan was nothing like I'd assumed. Behind his social butterfly exterior lay a thoughtful soul who could spend hours discussing the intersection of architecture and art history. He listened to my passionate rambles about brushwork techniques with the same intensity he brought to explaining the principles of sustainable design. For the first time in my life, I was happy. Really, really happy. Rowan drew me out of my shell with patient persistence, never pushing too hard but always encouraging me to step just slightly outside my comfort zone. When he invited me to a gallery opening, holding my hand as I navigated the crowded space, I realized I was falling in love. 6 months into our relationship, I was happier than I'd ever been. Then came the party that changed everything. It was at Rowan's friend Tyler's house, one of those casual gatherings that somehow always filled his social calendar. I'd gotten better at handling these events, mainly because Rowan never left my side, his presence a steady anchor in the sea of unfamiliar faces. But that night, Rowan had gone to get us drinks when I overheard a conversation that made my blood run cold. "Can't believe Rowan actually went through with it," a voice said from behind the corner, where I'd retreated to check my phone. "Best $50 I ever lost." "What are you talking about?" another voice asked. "The bet from last semester. We dared Rowan to ask out that quiet guy from the library, his boyfriend. Said there was no way he could get him to date him for more than a month. But look at them now, 6 months later. The world tilted sideways. My chest constricted as memories replayed with cruel new context. That first approach in the library, the careful attention, all those perfect dates. Had it all been orchestrated for a bet? I fled the party without a word, ignoring Rowan's calls and texts. For 3 days, I buried myself in work at the library, my sanctuary now tainted by memories of our first meeting. Rowan tried to find me there, but I'd switched to studying in empty classrooms instead. On the 4th day, I found a letter slipped under my apartment door. Rowan's normally precise architectural handwriting was messy, urgent. "Evren, please let me explain. Yes, there was a bet. Yes, I approached you because of it. But everything that happened after? That was real. So real it terrified me. I'd built my life around being the person everyone expected. Confident, social, always ready with a smile and a joke. Then I met you, really met you, and you saw right through all that. You showed me it was okay to be quiet sometimes, to get lost in passion for something, to feel deeply without apologizing for it. I should have told you about the bet right away. I was ashamed, not of you, never of you, but of myself for letting others push me into something that should have come naturally. Because the truth is, I'd noticed you long before that bet. I'd watched you in the library, completely absorbed in your books, and wondered what it would be like to be the focus of that intense attention. The bet gave me an excuse to finally approach you, but it was never about winning money or proving anything to anyone else. It was about finding the courage to talk to someone who intimidated me precisely because you didn't try to impress anyone. You were just authentically, unapologetically yourself. I understand if you can't forgive this. But please know that while our beginning may have been based on a lie, everything since then has been the truest thing in my life. I read the letter 7 times, until the words blurred before my eyes. Then I sat down and really thought about our relationship. I thought about how Rowan never tried to change me, how he'd integrated himself into my quiet world instead of always pulling me into his louder one. I remembered the way he'd light up when I shared obscure art history facts, asking questions that showed he'd been really listening. I thought about how he'd started carrying books about whatever artist I was currently studying just so we could discuss them together. Those weren't the actions of someone fulfilling a bet. Those were the actions of someone falling in love. Still, the hurt lingered. Trust, once broken, doesn't mend easily. After a week of avoiding him, I finally agreed to meet at a small cafe. Neutral territory, far from both the library and his usual haunts. Rowan was already there when I arrived, hands wrapped around a coffee cup, looking more uncertain than I'd ever seen him. The confident smile was gone, replaced by something raw and vulnerable that made my heart ache. "I got your letter," I said, sliding into the seat across from him. "Evren, I held up a hand. "Let me finish. What you did was cruel, even if you didn't mean it that way. You took something precious, our beginning, and tainted it with doubt. Now I question everything. Would you have ever approached me without that bet? Did you actually fall for me? Or did you just get too deep to back out?" Rowan flinched at each question, but I continued. "But here's the thing. I've spent the past week analyzing every moment of our relationship, looking for signs it was fake. And I couldn't find any. Because the Rowan I know, the one who gets excited about sustainable building materials and memorized the names of all my favorite pre-Raphaelite paintings, that person is real. He's not the social butterfly everyone sees at parties. He's better." "I don't deserve your forgiveness," Rowan whispered. "Maybe not," I agreed. "But I think we deserve a chance to start over. No bets, no pretenses. Just two people who see each other for who they really are." Rowan looked up, hope dawning in his eyes. "I'd like that. But this time," I added, "you have to promise to always be honest with me, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard." "I promise," he said, reaching across the table. After a moment's hesitation, I took his hand. We spent the next hour talking, really talking about our fears, our insecurities, the masks we wore for different people. Rowan admitted how exhausting it was to always be on, how refreshing it felt to just be quiet with me. I shared how his bet had triggered all my old fears about not being good enough, about people only pretending to like me. As we left the cafe, walking close but not quite touching, I realized something. Relationships aren't about perfect beginnings or dramatic gestures. They're about choosing to see the best in someone, even after they've shown you their worst. They're about forgiveness, growth, and the courage to be vulnerable with another person. Rowan and I had a long way to go to rebuild what was broken. But as we walked through the autumn evening, leaves crunching beneath our feet, I knew we'd find our way back to each other. This time on our own terms, no bets required.